let's do a quick little NHL wrap up here. I know that you actually, when I asked you this last night, hey, is there a series you want to talk about? And I was really happy that you told me that it was the Devils and Rangers, because I was like, hey, that's the series that I've probably seen the least of. Went back, watched all the highlights of it, saw back-to-back 5-1 win for the Rangers. Kind of playing with the Devils here a little bit. But that's a good Devils team. Are they out of this series just yet? What do you think?
I mean, anytime you're down 2-0 and you've conceded home ice advantage, like, you're pretty screwed. I mean, it's not impossible to come back. Obviously, the Rangers were 2-0, or sorry, the Rangers were 2-0 up against Tampa in the Eastern Conference Final, and Tampa came back and won 4 straight to get into the Stanley Cup Final. So it's not completely over, but man, it's looking rough. And the biggest sort of difference is we knew about the Devils as sort of inexperience in the playoffs. For me, the question mark wasn't the whole idea of, oh, they've never been in the playoffs, so that, like, that in and of itself wasn't the concern to me. For me, the inexperience was a concern in the sense of we don't have a proof of concept for how their game translates to the playoffs.
Yeah.
Because the Rangers, for example, were an inexperienced team last year, relatively speaking, and they still made it to the Final Four. We weren't as concerned about them, I feel like, because when you watch that kid line, they play like a grind it down low, forechecking style. Like, that's playoff hockey.
A lot of these players on this team that I think of, like, when I think of Mika Zibanejad, I think big moment player. Like, I think he's a big moment player. I think of what he did in the World Juniors for Sweden. Then you look at, Pat Kane, Panarin, Tarasenko, like, they have a crazy lineup. Well, yeah. You have Tyler Mott on your fourth line. Jimmy Vesey's had a real good comeback year, kind of changing his game a little bit. Their forward group is something special, and that's not even talking about the guy who just won the Norris a couple years ago.
And the difference with New Jersey was, like, their young players create off the rush. They're fast, they're skilled. They gave the Rangers a lot of trouble in the regular season, and that's why I actually figured this might be a close series. But you had no, like, they were the most dominant team in the NHL off the rush by basically every metric. But when the playoffs start, it's a different style of game, right? There's a lot less space to operate with in the neutral zone for whatever reason. And they just, like, watching that series, guys like Jack Hughes, Jesper Bratt, Nico Hischier, they haven't had any space to make plays in the neutral zone, which has sort of stymied their ability to create offense. And you look at, for example, the Florida Panthers last spring as well. After winning the President's Trophy, you look at them, they're one of the most underwhelming teams in the playoffs relative to expectations. Well, they were also the most dominant team in the NHL off the rush. And similar to New Jersey through the first 2 games of the series, the problem was that Washington, for example, in the first round, when they were starting to give the Panthers difficulties, and then obviously the Tampa, when they completely obliterated Florida, they had found a way to adapt to the way that the Florida created off the rush, set up the neutral zone accordingly. There was no space, and when that happened, it was like Florida had no plan B. So that's the question for New Jersey now, is do they have a plan B? Because if they don't have a plan B for how they're going to create offense, this could be a quick series.
It's almost like a football team that can't run the ball. It's like, hey, we're going to have to throw it. How are the Devils going to throw it in this one, right? Like, how are they going to do something different to get that skill in open ice and have space? Because you're right, like, when you take away a rush, and that's what a lot of teams rely upon, especially, you like you mentioned the players, like, Jack Hughes, one of the best players in the NHL off the rush right now. Nico Hischier's a good finisher in that position. These players that you have on the Devils, it's going to be interesting to watch them all. And this is what I think so much is talked about playoff experience. It does mean something, because the game is different in the playoffs. It's mightily different when you're playing a team potentially 7 times in a row and figuring things out and seeing stop, instead of playing a team and then 24 hours later you're off playing another team down the road in the NHL. Prepare for that game. The preparation behind playoff games is so different to me that I'm curious to see how they evolve. If they evolve at all.
What's also a big part of the reason is, for the Rangers, what I've seen is everybody's buying in away from the puck at a totally different level. Like, Patrick Kane had an outstanding game too, but what stood out to me was how he's hounding the puck, how he was back checking. I'm like, this is one of the players who in the regular season typically has some of the worst defensive metrics.
Playoff version, man.
And right, it's that experience, it's that understanding that, hey, I, like, really have to buy in. And you look at one of the late goals that he scored, it was forcing a turnover in the neutral zone and seeing the way him, seeing the way Tarasenko, again, not a defensive guy, a player that you might look at with defensive concerns, buying into that commitment away from the puck. It's not just been the gritty 2A guys that are committing to slowing the Devils down. It's everybody on the roster, and that's one of the areas.
New star that just came in, like the former star. That if you can get a commitment from Patty Kane after a trade coming into the Rangers, whatever they're doing in that locker room is good.
What also shows you, right? Like to throw it back into, okay, well, like what does this mean for the Canucks? What can they learn? That's also the difference between Bruce Boudreau and Rick Tocchet hockey in terms of what you need. I feel like in the first half of the season,
regular season success for Bruce Boudreau, lots of that. Playoff success for Bruce Boudreau, not as much.
Well, even in the first half of the season, and I don't necessarily mean to blame this on the on the coach. It's just this is what we observed. It's more a reflection of the passage of time, if anything. For the first half of the season, we saw, oh my God, like these forwards can create, but they don't. It doesn't look like they're giving a crap defensively, and that didn't change until Tocchet came in and was like, all right, this is unacceptable. And so that's a big part of the difference that we saw. And you see it where it's like, if you want to have any level of success in the playoffs, you need that 100% commitment 100% of the time from every player on your roster, no matter how skilled they are.
Completely agreed. I think that is experience, right? Where else can you get that from experience?
It's professionalism too.
Yeah, Yeah, you can buy in and try. You can try your little heart out. But I think like you need to experience it. I feel like in this moment, like you need to experience the playoff hockey to get it.
Yeah,
I think that's what's difficult for a Canucks team right now. Is there's a lot of these guys who have not experienced that, and they're gonna have to learn. They're gonna have to learn from the experience. You might win that first series and get your experience there, but like I don't think it's a bad thing for Podkolzin to go down to the AHL and actually get into some important games. Maybe that's a little bit of it. He did that in the KHL. He had a really good run in the KHL playoffs, so like he gets it. He gets it. He has to crank his game up. Be curious to see, but that series, yeah, it's going to be a fun one to follow here. The Rangers are rolling.